Good evening, hello and welcome. You're with the news today, your primetime destination for news, newsmakers, talking points. The big talking point, Jharkhand is still without a chief minister. The governor is keeping the Jharkhand Mukti Morcha waiting. What is he up to? We'll be joined by JMM MP in a moment. Mahua Majhi will join us. Also, Modi-nomics versus Manmohan-nomics. On a day when the interim budget is out, we'll have two fine voices taking each other on. Shashi Tharoor versus Jain, Sinha is our big face-off tonight. Here on the news today, we'll also have other special guests joining us. But first, as always, it's time for the 9 headlines at 9. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman stays away from any big bang announcements in the interim budget, makes no changes in direct or indirect taxes, raises capex spend to 11.1 trillion rupees. Prime Minister claims the budget is for a Viksit Bharat. Opposition calls the government's interim budget lukewarm, even as Nirmala Sitharaman expresses confidence of delivering a full budget in July, a sign that the government believes it will get re-elected in a few months. Over 24 hours on, uncertainty in Jharkhand as the governor keeps new chief minister-elect Champai Soren waiting. 43 JMM Congress MLAs announced backing for Champai. JMM-led alliance MLAs flown to Hyderabad now in another version of resort politics. Hemant Soren in one-day judicial custody. ED officials seek 10 days custody, claims Soren knowingly used crime proceedings. Supreme Court to hear his plea challenging arrest tomorrow. Hours after Varanasi court ordered the unsealing of a Gyanvapi mosque basement, puja performed in the mosque complex. Muslim side appeals to the High Court. Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal to lead protests in Chandigarh over alleged rigging in the mayoral polls. This on the same day as his 5th ED summon in the liquor gate probe tomorrow. Uttarakhand government to get the Uniform Civil Code draft tomorrow. The draft bill will then be presented by the Dhami government in the State Assembly on the 5th of February. Karnataka Deputy Chief Minister D.K. Shivkumar's brother D.K. Suresh triggers a row after calling for a separate country for South India. BJP hits out, claims Congress is practicing divide and rule politics. Tractors line up the streets of Brussels as farmers surround the EU Parliament. Farmers' protests rage across France, Germany, Italy, Poland and Hungary. But first to the breaking news at this hour, 24 hours on, no chief minister for Jharkhand. That's right, that's the big story that's coming in at the moment. The Jharkhand governor is yet to invite Champai Soren to form a government. 39 Jharkhand MLAs flown out to Hyderabad. The JMM Congress MLAs are now on board an aircraft to Hyderabad. Champai Soren says the governor will take a decision soon. But clearly the governor is keeping the JMM waiting, which is why the MLAs are being flown to Hyderabad amidst fears that they could be poached. So lots of dramatic developments now taking place at the moment in Jharkhand. Joining us now are our correspondents in different parts. Shreya is in Ranchi, Apurva is in Hyderabad and Preeti Chaudhary is here in New Delhi. First to you, Shreya there in Ranchi. What are you picking up? Why is the governor keeping Hemant Soren, the JMM waiting, Champai Soren waiting? What is the Raj Bhavan there saying the reason for not inviting him to form a government?
Well, Rajdeep, unfortunately, there is no plausible legal explanation behind the delay that the governor is, doing and not giving the time to the JMM and the coalition MLAs, despite them knocking the door at the governor twice right now. They've also released a video with the 43 roll call count so that to give the governor also a sense that they have the numbers needed, despite even giving the letter also to the governor. Now, because that's not taken place, they did not want to take a risk. They have boarded the charter, the two charters in the Ranchi airport. Unfortunately, what has also happened is because of the air visibility not up to the mark, the plane has not been able to leave as of now to Hyderabad, but they are still parked in these two planes in Ranchi. But so far, the governor hasn't given any clarity. We do not still know for the plausible reasoning.
You're saying that there is no plausible reason. Preeti Chaudhary, what could be the plausible reason? It's 24 hours now. The JMM is claiming they've got the signatures of all their MLAs, so it's not as if the JMM has broken as of now. for the governor to believe there's uncertainty? What is the plausible reason and what are constitutional experts saying?
Well, Rajdeep, let me first just tell you what was the reason given to the delegation which headed into the governor's residence this evening. Champai Soren was, of course, heading that delegation, and it had one member each from the coalition, that is the JMM-led coalition in the state of Jharkhand, which is the Congress, RJD, the left, and and there were 4 independents. But having said that, the reason that the governor gave Champai Soren was that this is unprecedented. It's never really happened before, where a sitting chief minister has been arrested and he needs to seek legal opinion on how best to tackle the situation, and that is why he needs more time. This is what officially the governor has informed Champai Soren, where he met him this evening, finally after 22 hours at about 5:30 p.m. Now, what are constitutional experts saying in this, Rajdeep, is that this is a constitutional crisis that has been created by the governor in the state of Jharkhand. Primarily the reason why, because as per protocol, when Hemant Soren stepped down and resigned as chief minister, he's in jail right now. Either the governor at that point of time would have made public that Hemant Soren, even though in jail, continues to remain as a caretaker chief minister till the time a new chief minister and a new government is sworn in. He never did that. So now Hemant Soren is in jail. He has stepped down. The governor hasn't called Champai Soren, who clearly has the numbers in terms of that video and the signatures of the 43 signatures that he took to the governor. He hasn't called him into a stake claim and form government, and not announced president's rule either. So what the state of Jharkhand is in a state of flux, which is a constitutional crisis, Rajdeep.
The constitutional crisis being sparked off, as you said, first time a sitting chief minister being arrested in this manner by the ED, the governor apparently checking to see what are the procedures to be followed. Apurva, you're there in Hyderabad, where many of the MLAs are reportedly arriving. These include not just JMM, but Congress MLAs. There has been a question whether all the MLAs are intact. What are you gathering? Are all the MLAs together of Jharkhand Mukti Morcha, or could there be some MLAs who've gone missing?
Well, Rajdeep, we do know right now that for over 35 MLAs there who have boarded the plane, and in fact we are getting to know that they're all set to arrive in Hyderabad Begumpet Airport, where I am at shortly. In fact, this is the airport, and as you can see, security has been beefed up out here just as we are waiting for the flight to take off from Ranchi Airport and arrive here in Begumpet here in Hyderabad. We're also getting to learn that most likely there are 3 places that have the Congress-led government here has narrowed down, where likely in either of these in one of these 3 resorts there's going to be these MLAs who are going to be put up at, and all of these 3 places are at 3 different parts of the city. Interestingly, one is right near this airport, whereas there's another airport there at Shamshabad, where there's yet another resort there where likely bookings are being made. So we're seeing 3 different resorts names that have been given out. In fact, the Congress government here, Revanth Reddy, the chief minister, has said that sources according to us do state that there's been all arrangements that are being made to ensure that all of these MLAs who are arriving here from Ranchi, from Jharkhand, are going to be taken care of well, and that all necessary arrangements have been made. So it's only about to be a couple of hours before we're getting to know if the MLAs are going to reach here and where they are going to be put up at. So all preparations from the Congress government here, that's already underway. We're already seeing that there's been an appointment that had been given.
Okay, so Apurva, they're claiming that all arrangements are being made for these MLAs in Hyderabad. Remember, Hyderabad is Congress ruled, one of 3 Congress ruled states, and there's a JMM Congress government, so they seem to believe they are safe in Hyderabad. So this is resort politics all over again, this time in Jharkhand. I want to go to Mahua Majhi. She is the JMM MP of the Rajya Sabha. Mahua Majhi, ये बताइए, आपके MLA सब हैदराबाद चले गए हैं. इससे सवाल उठता है, क्या आपको कहीं डर है कि आपके JMM MLAs एकजुट रहेंगे या बीजेपी में जा सकते हैं, जो अन्य राज्यों में हुआ है? अभी तक गवर्नर ने चंपाई सोरेन को बुलाया भी नहीं है. किस तरह से आप देख रही जो हो रहा है अभी? How are you seeing it?
देखिए, सबसे पहली बात कि हमारी पार्टी में पूरी एकजुटता है, गठबंधन की सरकार है. बार बार सभी लोगों ने माननीय मुख्यमंत्री जी के साथ एकजुटता दिखाई है। आपने देखा होगा कि कल जब माननीय मुख्यमंत्री हेमंत सोरेन जी ने इस्तीफा दिया और उस समय तुरंत उनको सभी एमएलएज का साइन किया हुआ, उसमें 43 एमएलए वहां सशरीर उपस्थित थे। वो सभी गए 3 बस में भरकर गवर्नर हाउस, और 5 प्रतिनिधि एमएलए जिनमें से एक माननीय चंपई सोरेन जी थे जो विधायक दल के नेता चुने गए, और उनके साथ 5 अलग अलग पार्टीज के एमएलए भी थे जिन्होंने वहां समर्थन दिया और समर्थन पत्र जमा किया। उन्होंने दावेदारी की अपने सरकार बनाने की। इसके बाद आज 22 घंटे गुजर जाने के बाद जब टाइम भी मिला 5:30 बजे का, उस समय भी वो 5 प्रतिनिधि मंडल ही गए, पांचों मिलकर। उस समय भी सभी एमएलए को वहां जाने के लिए परमिशन नहीं मिला, तो वो लोग वेट कर रहे थे और इस उम्मीद में थे कि अभी सरकार का गठन हो जाएगा, हमारे नए मुख्यमंत्री चुने जाएंगे, क्योंकि हमारा राज्य अभी अनाथ है, यहाँ कोई भी सरकार नहीं है। इसके बावजूद क्यों नहीं आखिर मुख्यमंत्री का शपथ ग्रहण हुआ या नियुक्त किया गया, जबकि बगल के बिहार में कितने मिनटों में या कितने घंटों में आपने देखा ही होगा कि तुरंत वहां पर शपथ ग्रहण समारोह हो गया। तो ऐसा क्यों?
मैडम,
एक ही देश में इसका भेदभाव क्यों?
मैम, ये सवाल उठता है कि अगर आपके साथ, इफ यू आर कॉन्फिडेंट ऑफ ऑल योर एमएलएज होल्डिंग टुगेदर, व्हाई यू फ्लाइंग देम ऑफ टू हैदराबाद? क्या जरूरत पड़ी है? अगर सब एमएलए चंपाई सोरेन के पीछे हैं, वेरी फैक्ट यू आर फ्लाइंग देम टू हैदराबाद जहां कांग्रेस का राज्य है, आपको कहीं डर है कि ये एमएलए एक साथ रहेंगे या नहीं? तो फिर ये रिसोर्ट में भेजने की क्या जरूरत है?
मैं आपको बता दूं कि जिस समय गवर्नर हाउस में आज 5:30 बजे वो लोग गए थे ना, उस समय सभी एमएलए की तस्वीर वीडियो जारी की गई थी, वहीं खड़े होकर, मैं भी वही थी, मेरे सामने ही उनकी रिकॉर्डिंग हुई, वीडियो बनाए गए, सारे एमएलए खड़े थे कि अगर माननीय गवर्नर उन्हें भी बुलाएंगे तो वो भी तुरंत 5 मिनट में वहां पहुंच जाएंगे। और वो वीडियो लेकर वो गवर्नर हाउस में गए, क्योंकि सबको जाने का परमिशन वहां नहीं था। 5 लोग गए, 5 लोगों ने वो वीडियो भी दिखाया और आग्रह किया, अनुरोध किया कि भाई अब शपथ दिलवा दीजिए। लेकिन ये कौन सी ऐसी मजबूरी है कि एक लोकतांत्रिक देश में संविधान के हिसाब से नहीं चला जा रहा है, और बगल के राज्य में, जो कि 1-1.5 हफ्ता पहले बिहार में तुरंत शपथ ग्रहण करवा दिया गया था, जब मेजोरिटी है, सभी विधायक कह रहे हैं, वीडियो जारी हो रहा है, उनके द्वार में जाके वो खड़े हैं, उन्हें बाहर फिर से वापस कर दिया जा रहा है। आखिर ये हो क्या रहा है, ये किसी को समझ में नहीं आ रहा है।
As you are saying, Mahua Majhi, for our English viewers to translate, she's saying that in Bihar, Nitish Kumar is sworn in right away. Here, the chief minister or the chief minister-elect has gone, shown a video. He's got the support of all the MLAs. He's got their signatures. Why has he not been invited still by the governor? Are there different rules for Bihar and for Jharkhand? This question will continue to boil. Remember, Hemant Soren is appealing to the Supreme Court now, and his appeal will come there tomorrow. Mahua Majhi, thank you very much for joining me. Let me turn from there to our other big story today, the budget. That's right, interim budget for 2024 ahead of the general elections was revealed by Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. Here are the main highlights. No changes have been made in income tax. In fact, the tax structure is completely untouched, as an interim budget usually does. Outstanding disputed tax demands up to rupees 25,000 have been withdrawn. The government says it's committed to building 2 crore houses under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana over 5 years. The capex outlay has been hiked 11.1% to 11.11 lakh crores. 2,05,250,000 crores have been set aside for the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana. Manrega allocation has been hiked by 43.3% to 86,000 crores. Vaccination of 9 to 14-year-old girls for cervical cancer. Fiscal deficit for 24-25 kept at 5.1% is what the government is committing itself to. Listen in to the finance minister and responses to her.
It is now appropriate to look at where we were then till 2014 and where we are now, only for the purpose of drawing lessons from the mismanagement of those years. The government will lay a white paper on table of the House. The exemplary track record of governance, development and performance, effective delivery and Jan Kalyan has given the government trust, confidence and blessings of the people to realize whatever it takes, the goal of Vikasit Bharat, with good intentions, true dedication and hard work in the coming years and decades.
मेरे प्यारे देशवासियों, आज का ये बजट इंटरिम बजट तो है ही, लेकिन ये बजट इंक्लूसिव और इनोवेटिव बजट है। इस बजट में कंटिन्यूटी का कॉन्फिडेंस है। ये बजट विकसित भारत के 4 स्तंभ युवा, गरीब, महिला और किसान सभी को एम्पावर करेगा। निर्मला जी का ये बजट देश के भविष्य के निर्माण का बजट है। इस बजट में 2047 के विकसित भारत की नींव को मजबूत करने की गारंटी है। मैं निर्मला जी और उनकी टीम को बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं।
शिक्षा के तरफ भी आपने ध्यान नहीं दिया, किसानों के तरफ ध्यान नहीं दिया, गरीबों के तरफ ध्यान नहीं दिया, मिडिल क्लास के तरफ भी आपने ध्यान नहीं दिया। सिर्फ आप अपने रंगीले भाषण को आप बोलते रहे। SC ST बैकवर्ड्स के लिए हम कुछ करेंगे, हम ये कर रहे हैं, वो अरे है सो उनका बजट रिलीज नहीं हो रहा है, उसकी स्कॉलरशिप रिलीज नहीं हो रही है कि ये बजट में कुछ भी नहीं है। और इसके हर क्षेत्र में गिरावट आई है, रक्षा क्षेत्र में भी गिरावट है।
So the 2024 interim budget, the final budget of the Narendra Modi's second term, has essentially been a report card looking back to the last 10 years, which is why we want to raise the big question. Who's done a better job of handling the economy, the Modi government or the Manmohan Singh government? 10 years each. And my first question is, who did a better job in pushing growth? Joining us on this debate are Dr. Shashi Tharoor of the Congress and Jain Sinha of the Bharatiya Janata Party. Appreciate both of you joining us. I will put up numbers, gentlemen, each time, and you can respond to those, because we are looking at a report card comparing two governments, both having done 10 years each. 21st on growth rate, 2004 to 14, UPA 6.82%, 2014 to 24, NDA 5.84%. Jain Sinha, you want to respond to that? Would you say that when it comes to growth, can the UPA claim that in their 10 years, growth was on an average basis better than it was during the last 10 NDA years? Or is that an unfair comparison given that there were 2 years marked by COVID?
It's a thoroughly unfair comparison, Rajdeep, for 3 reasons. First, the UPA inherited an economy in very good health, growing at 8%. And then, of course, they trashed the economy going forward, and they left the economy growing at less than 5% with inflation raging at 10%. So, number one, they trashed the economy on their watch. Number two, they didn't have to deal with a once-in-a-century pandemic, which is what we had to deal with COVID. And number three, the kinds of problems that they left us with, which is when we inherited the government in 2014, were very chronic, difficult structural problems that we had to resolve, which we resolved. And in fact, if you look at our record, as I said, we inherited an economy in the ditch, growing at less than 5%. We have made it the fastest growing economy in the world right now. It was a fragile 5 economy on the UPA's watch. It is a top 5 economy now, headed towards number 3 in the world. And if you really look at the underlying health of the economy, the structural factors that really determine whether we can sustain this growth, which is what were tragically damaged during the time of the UPA. Each of those underlying parameters is very, very strong. If you look at capex numbers, if you look at job creation, if you look at investments in the private sector, all of these are looking very, very positive. And I'll make one last point, Rajdeep. We are delivering better than 7% growth in a global economy that's growing slower than it has ever before. If we had the kind of tailwinds that the UPA enjoyed, we would be growing not just at 7%, we'd probably be growing at 9 or 10% right now. So that's what we have delivered, and that's why you saw the confidence today when we said that this is a Viksit Bharat ka budget. We are setting the framework for Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji's third term.
Shashi Tharoor, your response to what you just heard.
First of all, Rajdeep, your absolute number gives you the answer to begin with, that the UPA government did much better. But if you look at the current second term of the NDA, their average growth rate is a modest annual 3.5%. Now, yes, you can give them an excuse of COVID, but the fact is that India's post-COVID growth rate has been lower than that in Bangladesh, in Vietnam, and even in China, which has been going through a terrible series of economic setbacks. So let's not sit here celebrating growth figures. What's even more worrying to me is not just that the question of absolute growth, it's who's benefiting from that growth. Because if you look at figures, I mean, Jain rattled off a whole series of categories. I'll try and address some of them. If you look at incomes, where particularly the bottom of the pyramid, the annual growth rate of real rural wages has become negative for the first time in the last 4 years of NDA. Whereas, in fact, the first term, they had a very modest increase, much lower than the increase in rural wages during the Manmohan Singh government, which was averaging over 7%. They managed 3% in their first term, and now they've got a negative growth. Real rural wages in agriculture minus 0.6% in the last 4 years, non-agriculture wages minus 1.4%. There was a survey by Reuters this month, January 2024, in which the Indian population says 85% say they've had no increase. 44% say that their salaries have gone down, they're earning less than pre-pandemic. 41% say they've got the same, nothing better. Only 15% of Indians have reported an increase in their incomes in the second term. The poorest 20% of households in our country saw income levels shrink 52% since 2016, since before demonetization. And
but are you willing to accept, Dr. Tharoor, the premise that the government has, that they inherited an economy which they said was within the fragile 5 economies of the world? Today, India is the 5th largest economy in the world. So the Modi government is saying we've achieved a turnaround in the last 10 years.
As economists will tell you, given the growth in our population, growth into becoming the 5th and now soon the 3rd and maybe one day even the 2nd largest economy is inevitable as a function of your size of a population generating some sort of economic activity. What I'm concerned about is where that's coming from. From 2016 to 2021 in India, the top 20% of our population have seen almost a 40% rise in their income growth, whereas the bottom 60% has seen a negative income growth. This is the real problem. The government says improbably that they pull 25 crore people out of multidimensional poverty, but yet 80 crore people are receiving free food grains, which doesn't exactly suggest that people have stopped being poor. We are also looking at a government whose figures, sadly, have become totally unreliable, Rajdeep. One of the sad things about this government is that India used to be respected worldwide for the reliability of its statistics. Now those statistics coming out of Niti Aayog and of the government are not being trusted. Consumption expenditure surveys were not even done for 8 years, from 2014 to 2022. And this National Multidimensional Poverty Index rests on highly dubious and debatable assumptions. So there's a real worry. Let me say on the comparison with UPA, since you wanted me to address that particularly, 27.1 crore Indians were lifted out of poverty according to UNDP between 2005 and 2014. And they said that the poorest 40% in India had the greatest relative development during this period, whereas under the BJP, if you turn to World Bank figures, 230 million Indians slipped into poverty during the pandemic. Nearly 80% of the total number of people in the world who slipped into poverty in 2020 were those in India.
Can I just get Jain Sinha to respond? Because, Mr. Sinha, while COVID, particularly in the second term of the Modi government, did affect the economy, especially growth rates, the fact is post-demonetization, and we're talking from the first quarter of 2017, there was a slowing down, in fact, across 9 consecutive quarters. have there been missed opportunities in the last 10 years, which today the finance minister perhaps glossed over? Or do you see it as macroeconomic stability and the possibility of growing faster in the years to come?
So, Rajdeep, let me pick up on 3 points that Shashi ji made. The first point that he made, and I think he needs to check his numbers, is when he said that China is growing faster than India. I don't believe that is correct, and he quoted some other countries. I think he should look very carefully at the numbers, because the reality is that India is the fastest growing large economy in the world.
Right.
So I'm not sure whether those numbers are correct. So that's point number one. Point number two, about real rural wages. Again, I'm not sure exactly what is the best way to look at rural prosperity. I would suggest that the better way to look at it is rural consumption plus transfers. And that's a very important distinction, because we have major fiscal transfers going into the rural economy that may not show up in wages, but will show up in consumption and will show up in overall prosperity. And these transfers include the money that go through the Kisan Samman Nidhi, which is 6,000 rupees a month. It's the money that goes through Narega as well. So we have to look at all of these transfers and then do a before and after comparison to see whether the rural economy is doing well. I can only offer my anecdotal observation from Jharkhand, which is one of the poorest states in India, and I can certainly tell you that our rural economy 10 years later is flourishing compared to where it was 10 years before. And this is with a JMM Congress government that is notoriously corrupt and incompetent. So even then, because of all that we have been able to accomplish in the economy, I think when you look at actual prosperity, rural prosperity, you'll find that it has genuinely gone up. And in fact, there's another statistic which says that if you look across India, real incomes have gone up by 50%. So yes, we can play around with the numbers, but again, if you go and you ask people, they'll tell you that their lived experience has demonstrated a very significant improvement over the last decade. And then let me pick up a third point that Shashi ji brought up, which is to say that we have not grown fast over the last 5 years. That is entirely because of COVID, because we actually had minus 7% GDP growth during the COVID year and another slowdown the year after. That's a huge hit to take. And obviously, because we took that hit in the last 5 years, the last 5 years of growth is low. But when you look at it over the last 10 years, it evens out quite a bit, and we can take COVID out. Again, this was a once-in-a-century pandemic, which is unprecedented. The global financial crisis, which is what the UPA had to deal with in 2007 and 8, was a once-a-decade crisis. This was a once-in-a-century crisis, and almost everyone has praised the way India handled it at a macroeconomic level. So I think our economic management has been absolutely outstanding.
You know, it's interesting that when you have two fine minds, they can cherry pick the numbers that suit them. As I said, from 2017 to 20 also there was a slowdown. This was pre-pandemic. But let's look at the next question on handling of the economy. Who has handled inflation better? And if I look at that, clearly from 2004 to 14, it was an average of 8.1%. This is consumer inflation. 2014 to 23 under NDA, it came down substantially, 5.7%. Now, here you could argue that the NDA had favorable tailwinds, especially with oil prices coming down. But Shashi Tharoor, often the UPA or the opposition has criticized this government for rising prices for inflation. But one of the real achievements, many would say, of the Modi government is that they've never allowed inflation to go out of hand, unlike what happened after the global financial crisis when inflation entered double digits during UPA 2 in particular.
First, Rajdeep, since you gave Jain a chance to respond to me, but not me a chance to respond to Jain, let me just stress. I did check my numbers. They're accurate. Over the last 5 years, indeed, our growth rate is only 3.5% cumulatively. And all the other countries I mentioned also had COVID. We're not the only country in the world to experience COVID. Once in a century pandemic, they all were hit by it. They've done better than us. So let's understand that we shouldn't be patting ourselves too much on the back. That was on that particular issue. But coming to inflation, the fact is that our retail inflation, measured by the CPI, rose to 7.44% in July of 2023. And there's a survey by Kantar this month which says that 57% of Indians are worried about rising prices, which is a significant increase from 27% last year. Why are people worried? Go and take a look at the wholesale markets. in December 2023, you're talking about 5%, 6% inflation. Do you know that the wholesale markets in December 23 were 19.6% higher when it comes to food items like pulses compared to the same month the previous year? Paddy was 10.5% higher, milk is 7% higher, and vegetables in December 23 were 26.3% higher than in December 22. What does this mean? It means that for the Aam Aadmi to go to the market, he cannot afford to buy, or she cannot afford to buy, the same vegetables and pulses and doodh that she was buying for her family 1 year ago with the same amount of money. And the problem is her income hasn't gone up. Incomes have not gone up across the country. That's why this talk about inflation and GDP and per capita income is completely illusory when you look at the real experience of ordinary people in India today.
Jain Sinha, your response to what you've just heard. As I said, I've looked at a 10-year horizon, Dr. Tharoor. So therefore, over 10 years, clearly the numbers here of the NDA are much better than the UPA. You're looking presumably at what's happened in the last 12 months, but Mr. Sinha, respond.
So Shashi ji, of course, as you said earlier, Rajdeep, is very eloquently cherry-picking data because, as he himself said, the lived experience is consumer price inflation. It's not wholesale price inflation. If you see that wholesale prices are going up, then there are a whole host of measures which, in fact, our government has utilized to keep consumer inflation in check by releasing stocks, by controlling prices, by importing food grains and other food items. So by all of those ways, we have managed to keep consumer inflation much lower. And in fact, if you find that one sort of set of goods and services are going up in prices, you have to look at a composite basket. And there, for instance, if you look at oil prices, petrol prices, you look at other prices that constitute the consumption basket, there are many things you can do to make sure that your overall consumption basket price does not increase as much, which is effectively what the data is telling you. So yes, you can pick December WPI and cherry pick that data and say it's at 20%, but you have to look at the overall impact on individuals. But let me come back to a very important point that Shashi ji is bringing up, and that is to ask ourselves, how is the median person doing, right? And you can talk about this data or that data. Ultimately, you have to ask, what are people's sentiments? Are they satisfied with the government in its overall economic management and its overall policies? And the best and statistically the most accurate way to look at that is to actually look and see what voters are doing. And voters have just, been very, very much in support of the NDA government and have rejected UPA governments. So that is a composite sense of people's sentiment in terms of whether they're feeling like the government is delivering for them or not, whether the performance of the government is acceptable or not. So to my mind, that is the ultimate litmus test.
I want to therefore put two questions together. Who did better in poverty alleviation and who's done better when it comes to job creation? These are contentious issues. We can throw various numbers. One number recently in an article by economist Ashok Gulati quoting ILO was 2004 to 14 UPA times 8.4% unemployment, 2014 to 24 7.9%. When I look at labor force participation rate, clearly there are concerns, especially among women labor participation. Yes, it's come up a bit because you're also including unpaid labor as employment, but given that and given poverty alleviation, where between 2014 and 2005-6 to 2015-16, 27.1 crore people were lifted out of poverty. This is based on multi-dimensional poverty, source being UNDP. Source of Niti Aayog saying 2015-16 to 2019-21, 24.8 crore people were lifted out of poverty. So, I just want to understand from both of you, starting with you, Mr. Tharoor. Again, this is an issue that the opposition raises, that the government hasn't created enough jobs. The government hits back and says, look, we've done reasonably well. Look at our EPFO data. Look at the fact that many more people have registered for jobs, suggesting that it isn't as grim as you make it out to be. And here you've got Jain Sinha saying, if it was so grim, why are people still voting for us?
They're voting, unfortunately, for the BJP on other issues. After the disasters of demonetization, where people suffered terribly, they voted for the government because it became a national security election after Pulwama and Balakot. Tomorrow, the BJP is seeking votes in the name of the Ram Mandir. Let's be very realistic. It's not, unfortunately, the BJP has been brilliant at getting voters to stop thinking about their self-interest and instead vote some sort of sense of national pride, Hindu pride, identity pride, and so on. That's nothing. I mean, that argument is the most specious of the arguments possible because it is not actually answering the economic questions which are hurting people. But coming back to your specific questions, unemployment rates. According to the CMIE, our current unemployment rate is 8.7%, which is higher than any time in the UPA era. But what is worse is the unemployment rate amongst youth aged 20 to 24. That's at a record 45.4% in fiscal year 22-23. We've seen a situation where under the BJP, as recently, if you take all the unemployment overall, instead of 8.1, in October it hit 9.4%. So 8 to 9% seems to have become a kind of new normal. In the last year, 2023, the unemployment rate was averaging throughout between 8 and 9%. And the unfortunate truth is that even where jobs have grown, they've grown in financially precarious areas like construction work and low-end service roles, and agriculture and manufacturing jobs have actually dropped. So you're not really seeing any decent employment. If you look at educated people, for example, educated unemployment has worsened really badly with rising from 19.2% in the UPA era to 35.8% under the NDA, and postgraduates have gone up to 36.2%. This is not exactly a healthy situation. We've had 135 million workers added to the economy since 2018. During this time, the economy has created just 5 million formal jobs. A formal job is one that pays a regular salary and offers at least one social security benefit.
You know, Jain Sinha, you will recall the opposition continuously targets the government, saying the Prime Minister promised 2 crore jobs a year. The government says, please, at no stage was such a promise made. It is the opposition is not telling the entire truth on it. But the fact is, unemployment has been a big challenge, especially rural unemployment. The same Manrega that you all dissed when you all were in the opposition has now become almost a flagship scheme for the government. So when the Prime Minister speaks, for example, of the latest acronym, speaking about Garib, about the Annadata, about women, that's Nari, and youth, the truth is unemployment is a big challenge.
So unemployment is a very, very important priority, if not the top priority for our government. And that is very simply because of our demographics, where we have a lot of young people joining the workforce in large numbers. And it's always been a challenge in India to bring women into the workforce. And that is really where we have our most untapped potential. And for that, we need to create formal sector jobs. Now, let's, with that backdrop, look at our performance. Shashi ji quoted many numbers. I'll quote the numbers that are considered to be the best quality numbers by most economists, and those are the PLFS numbers that started in 2017. If you look at the PLFS numbers and you look at 2 metrics which are very important, number one, overall employment, that has been improving very significantly. Unemployment has dropped from about 6-7% right now to about 3%. This is from the PLFS data. And number two, labor force participation. Labor force participation in the PLFS data also has gone up quite dramatically. So those numbers look very, very steady. They look excellent. And then, you know, we should also look at EPFO data, which is really the formal sector jobs that Shashi ji spoke about. And if you look at the number of formal sector jobs that are being created steadily every year, that also has been very satisfactory, with millions of formal sector jobs being created every year. So overall, all of these are very positive indicators. And then we are not even picking up what has happened through the Swanidhi program, the self-employment programs, self-help groups, Swanidhi for, you know, roadside vendors, etc. There also, there's been massive credit that's been pumped into people for self-employment, lots and lots of mudra loans, and all of that has contributed to significant growth in income, both in the fully formal sector as well as in the informal sector. And one of the very big contributions that we have made to our economy has been the formalization of the economy, bringing lots and lots of people into the formal sector. We have about 6 crore MSMEs. 3 crore, that is 50% of them, have registered in the Udayam portal to become formally registered MSMEs, which means that they have access to credit, they can get access to a whole host of government programs, they can get social security, and so on. Similarly, if we look at agriculture, we've got about 11-12 crore farmers now part of the Kisan Samman Nidhi and getting signed up to the Kisan portal. So this formalization enables us to be able to support them and provide them with a host of modern conveniences and
But Mr. Sinha, Mr. Sinha, if all was so well, why did the government have to announce that we will extend our free food grain scheme for 80 crore Indians? In a sense, there's a recognition that people at the bottom of the pyramid are still hurting. Why not accept that?
Rajdeep, that's not correct. What the program does, the Garib Kalyan Yojana, is a program that's working very well. We have a large amount of surplus food grains. Those surplus food grains are rotting in warehouses. It's very good to be able to provide them to people. In any case, they were only paying 5 rupees per kg. Now they're not paying anything. And we are able to get this surplus food grain out. And in addition to that, if we are able to provide them this support, then they can take their consumption and increase that. They can invest in health, they can invest in education. So this is a good way to provide social security and support to the people who need it the most. And that's how we are going to lift every section of society.
Shashi, Tharoor, one of the achievements that the government keeps saying is that, look, we have provided people direct cash transfers, benefits that have gone to the people without any leakages. And that's why we've created this Labharti constituency of beneficiaries. When the Prime Minister, I repeat, uses that word, Gyan, the Garib, the youth, the Annadata and the Nari, he's saying that these are the vulnerable sections, these are the 4 castes in a way that we have targeted. And that's where you've got to see the government's economic achievement. We've kept people, the vulnerable sections, we have ensured that they get the benefits of DBT in particular.
No, wait, Rajdeep, you're going all over the place. Jain has said a couple of things that cannot go unchallenged. Number one, self-employment is nothing to boast about. The number of unpaid workers in the self-employed category has shot up from about 40 million to 95 million in the last 5 years. And a high level of self-employment merely means that there are no other alternatives for employment. The ILO doesn't even deem them to be employed if they're not paid. It's only India that considers them as self-employed.
No, but do you agree that the government's direct cash transfer schemes have alleviated to a large extent any sense of distress?
No, I'm coming to it one point after the other.
Yes.
Similarly, Jain mentioned the Mudra loans, for example, and the absolute fact is that 83% of the loans sanctioned under the Mudra Yojana involve an average amount of less than half a lakh, less than 50,000 rupees. That's not going to provide you a hell of a lot of long-term growth support or a lot of opportunities for other things. Then you come to the direct transfers that you mentioned. The fact of the matter is, we are seeing a situation in which those transfers are necessary because of other kinds of economic failure. 60% of our conventional micro enterprises, Jayanth mentioned MSMEs, those that were engaged in business activities for more than 10 years have perished in the last 5. 60%, can you imagine, of the MSMEs have closed down. So the fact that instead of the 6.25 crore MSMEs registered in 2016, we now have a number of 3.25 is not to the credit of the government. Jayanth is talking about it, that's so wonderful, they've registered and so on. They are 3 crore less than they were in 2016 after the NDA had come to power taking over these things. Okay. So, we have to look at the actual facts. Now, you did mention the question of the Jan Dhan Yojana and the money that's being transferred directly. The truth is 20% of the Jan Dhan Yojana accounts are inoperative as of December. That is just 1 month ago. And I'm quoting a government response in the Lok Sabha during the winter session. And nearly half of the inoperative accounts belong to women. So you're talking about Nari Shakti and so on. We've already said that youth unemployment is at record 45% levels. Now you've got women, half the Jan Dhan accounts they have are inoperative. Where are they helping these so-called 4 castes they need to help? Okay, I'm sorry.
Can I just come to the last point? Who's done better on reforming the economy? If we look at the economy, particularly as a continuum, and we can go back to 91, but I'm comparing 10 years of UPA and NDA, big reforms under UPA, FDI in retail, FDI in aviation, FDI in insurance and pension, Aadhaar introduced in 2009, value-added tax implemented in 2005. Big reforms under NDA, goods and services tax, insolvency and bankruptcy code, merging banks, direct benefit transfer, FDI via automatic route in most sectors. Reforms yet to take off, national asset monetization pipeline, disinvestment targets not met. Jain, Sinha, in conclusion, if I were to ask you what you believe is the singular biggest achievement when it comes to reform and taking the economy on the right path, what would it be according to you?
GST, IBC, PLI, and of course what we have done with startups. There were 350 registered startups in 2014. Now we have more than 1 lakh. We have about 112 unicorns. This has been an outstanding success for India. It's attracted a huge amount of FDI, private equity, venture capital, and that has really positioned India very well to being a globally competitive economy.
And if I were to ask you the negatives, would you accept, for example, private investment has not picked up, consumption has not picked up? Do you accept that despite all the incentives that you provided, even through the corporate tax scheme, the animal spirits of the economy have not been energized, particularly when it comes to manufacturing? Even the PLI has had mixed results.
I don't accept that, Rajdeep, at all. Let me just tell you that as far as private sector capex is concerned, that has gone up by about 20% in this fiscal year. It's gone up very strongly. If you look at PLI, it's been very successful. We are the world's second largest smartphone manufacturer now. That's largely because of PLI. And PLI, of course, has attracted more than 1 lakh crores worth of investment. And we've so far paid out only about 4,000 crores. So each of these very innovative reforms, each of these very innovative policies have had incredible impact. And I think people are noticing and seeing the benefits that they're getting from all of this.
Shashi, Tharoor, in conclusion, therefore, what do you believe has been, to your view, the biggest achievement when you were in power? And what, according to you, has been the biggest failure of this government in the last 10 years? Or what would you acknowledge this government? Will you give them some credit at all?
You gave us a very good list of things done when the UPA was in power, including creating an entire rights-based framework through which people could develop and exercise their economic rights as well in this country. On the government side, I take note of Jain's list. GST has now turned out to be a success, but the botched and hasty implementation in the first couple of years were disastrous, as we well know. As far as the PLI is concerned, there has been no cost-benefit assessment done by the government, other than in Jain's 2 sentences to you today. It was launched 3 years ago with 2020 actually, with high expectations, and it aimed to provide a subsidy of 1.9 lakh crores over 6 years. But as of this year, so far, only 3,400 crore in claims have been received and 2,900 crore disbursed.
So what will you give credit for? Will you give this government credit, for example, for creating a public digital infrastructure, which is, is now being seen by the world as an exemplar?
The tech stack, which again, something that was begun under UPA, but has been very well developed, the entire business of the UPI and all of these things have given us a worldwide reputation, no problem. But when Jain then says FDI has gone up, let me point out that according to the Reserve Bank of India, the fiscal year 2022-23 FDI was 42 billion, which is the same as it was in 2008, 2009, 15 years ago under UPA. Whereas during that time, foreign investment has come down from about 3.6% of GDP to just above 1% of GDP. And there is a comparison in the same period.
Rajdeep, FDI has doubled in our 10 years compared to their 10 years. So you can't cherry pick data in one year.
That's in absolute terms. In absolute terms, it has. But I want to ask both of you, yes, Shashi Tharoor.
Sorry, Rajdeep, it's an important point, because the truth is that the gross FDI into India, the government keeps boasting about FDI because they're pulling the wool over the public's eyes. Gross FDI stood at just 10 billion, which is lower than any time since 2007. And our share in global FDI inflows has been falling. As of January to June 2023, we only got 2.8% of the total FDI being invested around the world. So we shouldn't be boasting about FDI. Our FDI numbers actually are seen globally as showing a poorly performing economy, not a very successful one. There's a lot of stocks pulling up that the NDA government needs to do.
In conclusion, since both of you are Lok Sabha MPs who will presumably go to the polls in a few months from now, the general sense we got, the takeaway from today's budget speech was that this is a government that believes it's almost a dead certainty to win the next elections. It's inevitable. Do you believe, and Dr. Tharoor, you can start first and then I'll get Mr. Sinha for a final word, that 2024 is a done deal, and today's budget speech, in a sense, revealed that sense of self-confidence, no populism, no major freebies being announced, because this government is certain that the real budget will come in July 2024, and Nirmala Sitaram will be back to deliver it.
You call it self-confidence, I call it complacency. The fact is they're hoping to win on completely other issues rather than the economic well-being of the ordinary Indian. We will turn to the Aam Aadmi and ask them, are you better off today than you were 10 years ago because of any actions of this government? I can assure you that the moment people realize that they're not voting for a government to build temples, they're voting for a government to improve their economic well-being, you're going to find a very different result from the one that is so smugly being proclaimed by my good friend Jain Sinha's party. I don't think you're going to get the result. They're not going to get the result.
Mr. Sinha, your final response, therefore, is the government complacent or is it confident?
Rajdeep, we are very confident and we welcome an election that is fought on economic issues. On every other issue, of course, we will trump any other party very easily. Economic issues also we will trump everyone else because we have delivered outstanding economic performance, and that's not based on our data alone. It's based on what the world is saying and very reputed agencies around the world are saying. And of course, it is manifested right down to the most remote village and to the poorest family in the most remote village.
And you're willing to take up the challenge that Dr. Tharoor has offered. Are Indians better off today than they were 10 years ago, right?
Rajdeep, I deal with it every single day in Hazaribagh, which of course, as you know, is in the state of Jharkhand, and which is a very poor state. And every day I can walk into even the remotest village and answer that question in the affirmative and have people clap because we have actually delivered for them in their economic life and in everything else, of course, also. But because we have delivered economically, they can see कि उनको पक्का घर मिला है, उनको बिजली मिली है, उनको आयुष्मान भारत मिला है, मुफ्त में राशन मिला है, सबको हम लोगों ने टीकाकरण करवाया है. तो when we go forward and we explain that, everybody agrees with us.
I can see Shashi Tharoor dying to get in with a final word. Dr. Tharoor, you have a final word?
Well, the bottom 60% of India's people, according to all figures, have seen negative income growth in the last few years. So I'm not, obviously the elections are going to demonstrate if Jayant is right or not. But given that the poorest 20% of households in our country have seen income levels shrink more than half, 52% from their levels in 2016, I just don't believe that people are going to be saying, wow, we're so much better off. Okay. Every schemes that this government boasts of, even the Ujjwala cylinders, most people can't afford refills. You're in a situation in which you've got a number of token gestures, but the real lives of ordinary people have only suffered, not improved.
Jain Sinha, Shashi Tharoor, maybe we should make this an annual feature. Every time there's a budget, get the two of you to spar with each other, because it's wonderful to hear two erudite voices speaking to each other and not necessarily at each other and giving us their viewpoints. We leave it to the viewers to judge who performed better when it came to handling the economy, the Manmohan Singh government in 10 years or the Narendra Modi government. Jain Sinha, Shashi Tharoor, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.